Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. You want me to sing? It'll be a real quick meeting. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to ESLA's second Sure Thing event of the season. I'm George Seafried. I'm the vice president, and Bob is, where's Bob? There's Bob, right there. There's Bob Campbell, our current president. I'm going to be the MC for tonight, introducing our speaker and talking a little bit about a few things. I'm not sure if most of you know about the geographical bounds of ESLA. You know, Elk-Skegemog Lakes Plural Association. So our area that we get ourselves involved in starts all the way up at the Rapid River, comes down through the bayou by the bridge there on Crystal Springs Road, is that the right road? Beach, and then comes on down the Torch River into Lake Skegemog, and then over into Elk Lake, and then down into the river, ending up here in the bay. So that whole geographical area is an area of concern to our organization and to you members. You live in a lot of that area, hopefully. But this is not just an organization that exists and does its work, you know, from May through September, October. We do stuff as the board, planning and analyzing data all year round. And in the winter, we have board meetings, we make plans, we analyze things that have been done the year before and decide what to do next year. So even though we have these sure things, it's an opportunity for everybody that's a member or want to be a member, right? Everybody wants to be a member here, right? For you to interact with other people that are concerned about things in our environment here in the lakes. This is a very busy time of the year for ESLA, besides having these sure thing events. Right now, our organization with volunteers and our lake biologists, we are taking all kinds of samples of things in the lake. We do plankton sampling, which just started last year. We sample the plankton, these little organisms, to figure out how healthy the food chain is, if you will, for some of the fish and other biotic things that are in our lakes. We do road end surveys where we go to the ends of roads that really is owned by municipalities and various organizations. And we try to see if there's invasive species there, what the condition of the shoreline is, if there's a lot of erosion, and we try to get action if there's problems with that. Let's see, Sam may have to help me, but we have road end surveys. We're looking for, well, everywhere we're looking when we look for invasives. We're looking for Eurasian water milfoil, yellow flag iris.
Curly leaf pondweed.
That's right, and
That's a big one.
And
really any invasives. So.
any invasives. And we're also interested in what kind of situation the algae with the water, swimmer's itch. We take water quality tests that many of our volunteers get involved with, checking out the amount of dissolved oxygen that's in the water. And this is done on a regular basis. This is not just done once a year, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 times a year, just to get indicators of what the health of the lakes might be. And hopefully these are things that you all are interested in as well. What is the health? We're all concerned with all these issues, but the best thing to do is say to ourselves, what can I do about it? Can you volunteer? Can you help support organizations like ours? Can you call someone up and say, you know, there's something happening over here. I'm not sure what this is growing. I'd like to get somebody out to help me understand it. So these are the kind of things we look to our members, to you, to do. And of course, events like this and all the research and the testing that's done it cannot be done without the support of our memberships and financial support. So we thank you for doing that. We thank you for coming tonight. And hopefully going forward, this will be just much more of a successful organization. Tonight, our speaker will be performing, if I could say that, Casey, will be performing without the use of visual aids. We've, earlier today, were able to operate this brand new equipment that the pavilion has installed. It ran for, I don't know, an hour or so. We were practicing, and it doesn't take a lot of practice, actually, but it is no longer working. We've tried about an hour ago to get it up and running again, and it's not. So Casey will be speaking here with just her audio, no visual. Is that correct? I'd like to introduce Casey Clement. Casey Clement is a employee of the Northwest Michigan Health District, covers 4 counties. She's based out of Bel Air. I think she's been working there for about 10 years. She is the environmental coordinator now for the district. Come on up, Casey. And she will be speaking tonight about septic systems. And you know, septic systems, whether you live in an area that has sewers or not, septic systems and our groundwater are pretty important to all of us, no matter where you might live. Close to the water, far away from the water. Doesn't matter. Septic systems, groundwater, important issue. So I will introduce Casey and good luck.
Thanks, George. I usually get that at the end, but we'll start at the beginning. All right, so like George said, there is a nice presentation that he has a copy of, and I don't know if he can email it to everyone after this event as a good refresher for you guys. So let me set this down and log in. Okay, I'll have a very tiny screen here. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to see it, but we can just follow along. Okay, so there's been a lot of talk about septic systems over the years, and I'm sure most, if not all of you, have heard a general discussion about what they are. So what an on-site septic system is it's usually comprised of a septic tank and a drain field. Your drain field is pipe and stone, and they are permitted in areas where there is not municipal sewer or some other type of wastewater system available. And then an important thing to note is that most properties that have on-site septic systems also have a water well. We'll get into that. Yep, a water well. So a well drilled for potable water, for drinking water purposes. So just some quick things to note. I brought with me. So on-site septic systems are regulated by our district sanitary code. So I work for the Health Department of Northwest Michigan. We are a 4-county health department. Our counties are Antrim, Charlevoix, Emmett, and Otsego counties. So this little green book regulates residential on-site wastewater in those 4 county areas. This code is available on our website at nwhealth.org. So in addition to our district sanitary code, Michigan also has a water well and pump installation code. This code is also available online, and that will also talk about well isolation distances to septic as well as other sources of contamination. So for residential on-site systems, which is going to be the primary type of system that we're talking here, we won't get into commercial systems. So residential septics, your septic tank has to be 50 feet to any surface water, and your drain field has to be 100 feet to any surface water. Those are under ideal conditions for new construction. We can do some variations from that code if it's a replacement system for a site where maybe that isn't achievable. Your bottom of your drain field stone has to be 48 inches to indications of seasonal high groundwater. Seasonal high groundwater is not always where water is standing in our test hole. So indications of groundwater can be where water is standing. It can also be soil color and soil texture. Your bottom of your drain field stone also has to be 60 inches to any limiting layer. So limiting layers under our code are clay, peat, muck, or marl. And then the drain field and the tank have to be 50 feet to residential water wells and 10 feet to property lines. But this will all be in the presentation that's going to be emailed. Okay, so for your septic tank. Your septic tank is usually concrete, sometimes now it's plastic. The function of a septic tank. Does anybody know what the function is?
Separate solids from liquids.
Okay, there we go. So with your septic tank, the function is essentially retention time. So anything that you flush down your drain, anything that goes out of the drains to your house goes into the tank. Or at least it should be going into your tank. If it's not, we have a problem. So in your tank, the tanks are sized based on the number of bedrooms in the home. So in the tank, the solids settle to the bottom, the fat soils, the greases float on top, And then it's that middle that we call the clarifying layer is what actually goes out to your field. So hopefully no solids and no fats, oils, and greases are actually going out to your field. They could potentially plug up your field and shorten that lifespan. So I have some pictures here, but I don't think you guys can see them. Does anybody know what the minimum retention time for anything that goes into that septic tank should be?
No.
Okay, so we want at least 24 hours retention time in that tank, which means that tank should be adequately sized so that whatever you flush has a minimum of 24 hours in that tank to either settle out before going out to your field. So through our trauma transfer programs and in conversations with homeowners over the past 10 years I've been doing this, there is a badge of pride. I go out to sites and people are like, I've never had to pump my tank in the past 40 years. That's, yeah. Well, the good thing is at least they know they have a tank. Not everybody does. So we recommend pumping your tank every 3 to 5 years or based on the use of the home. So when we pump out the tank, what you're doing is actually pumping that tank out and you're removing that solid level from the bottom as well as all the fat, oils, and greases on top. What happens when you don't pump your tank is that solid level on the bottom builds up. Now all of a sudden you're cutting into your retention time. You have less time in that tank, less capacity for everything to settle out. So you're more at risk for suspended solids or fat, oils, and greases to go out to your field. So the second question I have on here, like I said, you guys can't really see it from there. On the outlet of your septic tank, we have what's called an outlet baffle or an outlet T. Some tanks have them precast with concrete. Other tanks will have a plastic one installed. The purpose of that is what it sounds like. It's an outlet T, kind of looks like a T that goes on the outlet of your tank. What that's going to do is prevent any fats, oils, and greases from going out into your field. So next time you guys have your tanks pumped, make sure you have one. And then what can go into the outlet baffle or outlet T of your tank is something called an effluent filter. It can be plastic and slotted, or you'll have ones that look like a giant bottle brush. The function of that filter is it will catch any suspended solids before they make their way out to the field. It sounds great. A lot of these tanks are buried and they're not easily accessible. So now all of a sudden you have this filter that needs to be maintained that's buried. And what we have found is in the holidays, you're doing a lot of baking, you have a lot of family, that's kind of at risk of when that filter is going to plug up. So they were required in 2007 in our 2017 district sanitary code. They're no longer required, but they're recommended. Okay, so for septic tank maintenance, we talked about pumping your tank every 3 to 5 years or based on use of the home. And then a big point that I want to make is to make sure you have secure septic lids. So it is, secure septic lids. So lids, covers on your tank. Yep. So I have a video here. You guys can't see it. And it's not actually going to be in the PowerPoint because with the video it was too big for me to send. But it was doing an inspection where I have a lid to grade, and if you flip it up, the tank is right there. So make sure you have secure lids. It's a big safety issue for any curious little kids or anybody looking around. We want to make sure that these tanks are secure so that nobody has unintended access or could potentially fall into a tank. So, there are horror stories online. So look or don't look, but make sure your lids are secure. There is something on top of your lid. Sometimes your tanks are buried below ground. You can have, it's called a riser. It's like usually corrugated plastic with a lid on top. Some of those lids on top screw down. If yours screw down, make sure they are still screwed down. A lot of times I go back to sites and the lids have been removed and the screws are not always in place. So just when you guys get home, check them. So some other septic tank maintenance is we don't want to drive, landscape, or do any construction over your tanks. There have been a handful of sites I've been to where all of a sudden the septic tank is now being used as like a footing for a deck. Let's not do that either. We want to maintain access to the tank. we need to pump that tank out. We need to get access to it. So keep that in mind when you are doing any landscaping, driving, hardscaping, anything like that around your property. And then the last point is, we talked about how septic systems are usually a septic tank and a drain field. Some systems also have what's called a pump chamber. A pump might be needed to reach a drain field at a higher elevation, or you are pumping to an elevated drain field. As of 2007, we required high water alarms on those pumps. If it's possible, they're on a separate breaker. That way that pump is gonna alert you that there's a problem in case it doesn't go off before you have effluent coming out of the top of your tank. And then if that lid goes off, just don't silence it. Right, there's an alarm. It's usually an audio visual. Okay, so drain fields. I have some pictures of drain fields in here. They'll be in the presentation along with the video. So under our district sanitary code, there are 3 different types of systems I can permit, depending on my site conditions. So like I said, drain fields are comprised of stone and pipe at a minimum. Under our sanitary code, I can also permit alternative drain field products on a case-by-case basis as long as it meets our code. But the majority of systems in our area are still drain field, stone and pipe. So I have a couple pictures in the presentations for what they actually look like. So a lot of people don't actually see their drain field because it's covered up by lawn. And then underneath our code, we can also permit something that's called an advanced treatment system. Advanced treatment systems are a third component that are added to your septic system in areas of environmental and sensitivity. They're in areas where we have high groundwater or high clay, or maybe we have a decreased isolation to surface water. So what that advanced treatment system is it's a third component that's added between your septic tank and your drain field. Those advanced treatment systems have a pump and then usually some type of media for bacteria to grow on. So that pump is gonna kind of spray the effluent over that media, and now we're changing the treatment from anaerobic to aerobic treatment. So the waste product that's going out to your drain field is actually kind of pre-treated. So what you're sending out to your field usually has less biological organics, lower total suspended solids, before it makes its way down to that potentially higher groundwater elevation. And then into drain field maintenance. Does anyone know the most common drain field failure that I see? Roots, yes. There's a very lovely picture. So, don't worry, you guys will get a copy. So we recommend trees and any woody vegetation 10 to 20 feet around your drain field. To be honest, it should probably be more. So when we think about your drain field, if you're in that home and using water, it is a constant source of water for the vegetation. And over the past couple summers, we haven't had much rain in July. So those roots are really good at finding its way into your drain field and into the pipe. And then over time, your pipe can plug up with roots, so it can't accept the liquid coming from the tank, and you'll end up with the drain field in a state of failure. Other drain field maintenance, probably the biggest one is trees, but we don't want to drive over your field. You can compact it. You don't want to snow plow over your field. So in the winter, the snow actually acts as an insulating layer. So if you remove that snow from your tank or your field, you're at risk of potentially freezing your field. I also have, we don't want any vegetable gardens or raised beds on top of your drain field. So in some areas, the drain field might be the only flat spot on the property. Still don't plant your garden or do raised beds on top of your system. Yeah?
I've seen several things with regards to just regular lawns, no mow grass. What about wildflowers? You know, in other words, if you want to plant something that's native to Michigan in that area.
I think that would be great. So it would be my recommendation that you don't plant anything that, I kind of call it that wants wet feet. You don't want to plant any plants that like their roots to be submerged in water all the time. You want plants that usually like generally drier sites. That way there's less risk of them wanting to grow into those pipes where there is going to be potentially some liquid.
knowing that a lot of us have our drain fields probably amongst the trees.
Mhm.
Okay. What is the potential? I mean, if you've done things that you're supposed to, at least in our case, what's happened is we've had 2 trees that actually we've taken down throughout the years, and so that's extended the surrounding area between 10 to 20 feet. I mean, and so with that and knowing that, what is actually the potential life expectancy of a drain field from a root invasion?
I can't answer that. I think it's maybe it depends. Kind of depends on the trees, right? I routinely get asked what's the lifespan of a drain field. The state kind of has a number is that an average septic system can be expected to last 25 years. I really hate throwing that number out because so many different factors go into that. Was that drain field installed appropriately? Were the soils it was installed in okay? How is water and the drains being used in the home? How are trees and vegetation? There's a lot we don't know. So I guess my thought would be is for your field, the roots are...
Outside of the top 4 to 6 to 8 inches, it's all sand. I mean, we're out on Elk-Skegemog Point, and so if anybody else who lives out in that area, I mean, when you're digging into that, you have that extra benefit to actually have all of that sand beneath you. So the question is, you know, I mean, that's where the question really came in, because our drain field exceeds 30 years at this time. We've never had an issue with it.
Right, and a lot of people don't. So, I don't know if that answers your question. Okay. And then I guess that's the second point to bring up, is I can't remember if I touched on it. So our sanitary code covers Antrim, Charlevoix, Emmett, and Otsego County. I know Elk-Skegemog also is bordered by Kalkaska, which is part of District 10 Health Department, which is a different sanitary code, and Grand Traverse County. And Grand Traverse County also has another code. So, and I have links to all of those at the end. So getting back to drain field maintenance, kind of the same thing, be mindful of the landscaping, hardscaping over your field. And then also try not to irrigate over your drain field. Does anyone know why? Yeah. So when we size your drain fields, we size drain fields based on number of bedrooms of the home. We have a general, each bedroom roughly approximates 125 gallons a day of wastewater. That is totally dependent, but that's the number that we use. If you are irrigating on top of your field, all of a sudden your drain field is trying to accept that water from your tank for that X number of gallons it was designed for. It wasn't designed for accepting the house gallons plus all of the gallons you're irrigating on top of it. So if your drain field is starting to get like wet or spongy, or if you're having trouble like maybe flushing your toilets, if you're irrigating, stop. And then we talked about what you put down your drain matters. So all of the drains in your house should be connected to your septic system. Under our district sanitary code, it doesn't differentiate between gray water and black water, so everything should be tied into your system. So I have some items, and we're gonna talk about if you should be flushing them or not. Okay, if I was cooking with a lot of oil or bacon grease, would I wanna flush that? You guys did good. What about using a whole bunch of bleach or cleaning products all at once? Okay, what?
Kills the bacteria.
Yeah, yep. We want to keep the bugs healthy.
Casey,
Yes?
you said all at once. Can it be used intermittently?
Yeah, so if you are in your home and using water, wastewater, I don't expect you guys to not clean your houses, but just be mindful of how much cleaning product you're using. One of the issues that I see is there's a large seasonal population in our 4-county area. A lot of these houses are in and cleaned and bleach used, and nobody's in the home. So then what happens is all of the cleaning products is killing everything in the tank because there's no other inputs coming into the tank. So, any follow-up questions to that?
Why don't we want to kill these bugs?
That's a good question. So the bacteria is what helps break down the waste products in the wastewater. So our code, that's a very good question actually. Our code has that 4-foot separation to groundwater in hopes that in that 4 feet, you're gonna have natural microbes in the soil that are gonna break down the waste products and the bacteria before that water re-enters the groundwater table. So thank you. Yeah.
Does it help to add bacteria to the tank? I know they sell it commercially, you know.
I don't have a professional opinion on that.
So it was actually my question.
Yeah.
The gentleman's referring to something like Rid-X, and there's opinions all over the place
There
if it
is.
does any good or not. So the question is, does adding something like that make any difference?
I don't have a professional opinion on that. I have septic tank pumpers who swear by it. Some who say save that money and put it towards the new drain field when you need it. You're not going to hurt anything. I don't know how much it's going to be doing to help. So if you want to use it, go ahead.
And they're gonna be like yeast that are supposed to help.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something I do a couple times, 2 times a year, okay?
Yep. So then along those lines, just be mindful of how much biologicals you're putting down your drain. We want to make sure that the bacteria are eating the waste products from the house. You can actually overload them if you put like a whole bunch of food like through the garbage disposal, because now all of a sudden you're giving them like too much food.
Well, that's what I heard, like coffee grounds, eggshells, certain things you shouldn't be putting in there. Is there a list of things that you should not?
No.
Actually, if you use your coffee grounds and spread it around the plants that you want to keep the deer away from, that's a potential concern. Plus it adds to the soil. Your eggshells will actually calcify the soil a little better and create a little more of a basic environment, again, beneficial.
Yeah, I agree, when I was downstairs, I used to put all that in my garden in the backyard, the coffee shell, and the coffee grounds, and the eggshells.
What about water softeners?
Okay, well, Gary is ahead of me here because I have this bag. All right, Gary, what are your thoughts? I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Water softeners.
Okay, so it is a bag of water softener salt. So water softener,
Looks like a former bag.
it is a former bag, it's from the softener at my house. So water softeners do not actually have to be tried into your septic system. So the softener regeneration is not considered wastewater, so you can dispose of it another way. It becomes a gray area though with the plumbing code. But on some engineered systems, you will see in the plans that they do not want the softener tied into the septic system. So you're adding salt and chlorides. It can throw off the chemistry of that wastewater product. The other thing that I've seen is your water softener regenerates, and it can regenerate quite a bit of water. Now, all of a sudden, you have that regeneration water tied into the number of gallons coming to your house, and you could potentially overload and flood your system. So you can tie it in, but it doesn't have to be tied in. If you don't tie it in, like I said, it's kind of gray underneath the plumbing code, so I can't really speak to that. But you can check with the plumber or the building department. Okay, I've got 2 more things in the bag. All right, what about flushable wipes? No. I know they're touted as flushable, but if you go online, there's a lot of stories about these flushable wipes. And I'll let you read those at your own risk. All right. Yep, signage is good. All right, last item. Do we want to flush feminine hygiene products? No. Right, or diapers. Also a good thing not to flush.
What about soap?
I don't. I haven't researched it, but hey, it could be a good experiment for you guys. All right, so then we've talked about how to maintain what your system is and how to maintain it. And then how do we know when we need a new septic? Well, the obvious one is if we have new construction on a vacant site. we need a septic system to support the home if there is not municipal sewer available. You also need a septic if your existing drain field has failed. Do you guys know some common signs of drain field system failure?
No.
Soggy ground.
Yep, soggy ground's a good one. Yes. Smells, backing up into the house. Yep. So sometimes we'll hear toilets won't flush or the toilets will make a gurgle. Those are starting to give you some indications. Some other things are, if you pump out your septic tank, if you have liquid flowing back from your field into your tank, that's also not a good sign. So just another reason to keep your tank pumped out. Those pumpers can tell you a lot. All right, so then we also need a new septic. I'm sure you guys living in the area, you have noticed that there is a lot of new construction and renovation and additions in the area. So under our district sanitary code, we do a septic evaluation to determine if the existing drain field is in compliance for the proposed construction project. So existing systems would be in compliance. Underneath our code, we have a 1-bedroom variance. So if your existing field is adequately sized and adequately isolated for potentially 3 bedrooms, we would allow you to add a 4th bedroom as long as you have room to install a 4-bedroom field if or when that field fails. And then under our code, we talk about changes of use, and changes of use are those triggers for when we would do a septic evaluation. So changes of use would include tearing down and rebuilding. All of a sudden now you have new construction. So we have really counseled people, if you're looking at demoing your home, please check with your local health department to make sure that your site is suitable to rebuild before you demo. Changes of use are also adding the additional bedrooms, but then also under our code, we have adding or expanding greater than 50% of the existing conditioned square footage. So that kind of becomes that sticky point, is how much conditioned square footage are you guys adding?
Question.
Yeah.
Are you notified when building permits are filed? How are you notified? Whether it be new and or a renovation?
Yep, so with our Antrim County Building Department, our office works really closely with them. So for new construction, the building department needs a permit from us and that permit number in order to issue their building permit. So the same thing for additions. If people are looking at adding on to their home, renovating their home, the building department will kick them over to us so we can do a file review, see if an evaluation is needed or if we might have information. Because we are getting a lot of these requests in the past couple of years, our office in Bel Air put together what's called a building and remodeling worksheet. I think it's available on our website, where if you're looking at doing some type of renovation, construction, addition, you can kind of do a summary of your project and include plans and send it to us, and we'll review it to see if it's something we're gonna need to evaluate your septic, or if we can issue what's called a verbal to the building department.
I'm sorry.
A verbal? So like no septic evaluation is needed.
In the case, one more question.
Yeah.
In the case of new field, do you license contractors or do your inspectors go to the site?
Okay, I'm gonna tease that question apart. So in our 4-county area, we do not license our installers. District 10, Kalkaska County does. I'm not sure about Grand Traverse. In Antrim, we do not license our contractors. So what happens when you apply for either a septic permit or an existing system evaluation is you apply, pay the fee, our front office processes it, and then they send it to the sanitarian covering that township or that coverage area. The sanitarian will make a site visit. So for all of our site visits for on-site wastewater, we do a 6-foot test hole, usually with a hand auger, unless you guys want to be nice and get us a backhoe on site. But that 6-foot test hole, we are going to see what type of soils you have, if there's any indications of groundwater, and then we will look at isolation to your well, potentially neighboring wells, surface water, and any other items. And then, so when we issue our permits, so for septic permits, they are good for 2 years from the point of issuance. When that septic is installed, the installer will call our office and we go out and do a final inspection. So we go out and make sure that drain field is installed as permitted, and then you get an as-built drawing from us showing where everything is located and the date it was approved. Any other questions?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
As you look around this room, you see a lot of gray and white hair. And that tells me there's a lot of grandmas and grandpas here. And most of the year, if they're year-round, some of them go to warmer places in the winter. But in the summertime, our homes are draws. They're magnets for our children, our grandchildren, our great-great-grandchildren. And suddenly, those 3-bedroom homes, 4-bedroom homes, have 20 or 25 people in them. And it may be for 4 or 5 days. Does that make a difference?
I would just ask that you be mindful of how much water you're using during that time frame, right? You guys, if you're on septic, you're gonna know if it's a septic where maybe you should be limiting how much water you're using, right? If you know that you're kind of at limited capacity. Or if you know that maybe your drain field's undersized, or you know you can stress it out easy, you can always get your tank pumped ahead of time. That way you have 1,000, 1,600 gallons of capacity before it goes out to your field. That intermittent use, it happens. It happens quite a bit up around here. And I don't see massive signs of failure. But you can do what's called hydraulically overloading your field, where essentially you are just putting too much water out there, and then you flood your field. You can potentially try to rest it and see if it'll dry up, but you just want to be mindful of how much water you're putting out there at one time.
How about running a porta potty?
You could do that, but when you look at it, so toilets are what, 2 to 5 gallons a flush? Like, that's not a ton of water, depending. Some of the major water uses would be, are you doing like 7 loads of laundry in that day with all that company? Maybe spread it out. Do you have a bunch of teenagers? Are they taking really long showers? So, porta potty would be great if you want to, if your company wants to use it. But some of those other more water draws.
Well, that's what I was told years ago, is like, don't do laundry, and if it's a rainy day, if it's raining a lot, then you've got the natural water, and then also so if you can put that off to another time, a day or 2, that might help, but don't, that way not burden the septic.
Yeah, you can just try to spread it out throughout the week. Where if it's raining, maybe don't do like all 5 loads that day,
Right.
but you can do a couple.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just not a lot.
Just not all of it.
That's what I was told, especially if you got a lot of people taking showers and the laundry,
Mhm.
dishwasher and all this.
Yeah, that's a lot of water
And
into your
when
system.
it's raining, then you've got too much water.
Yes. Okay.
What is it?
Okay, well, you guys pick who wants to go first.
Okay.
Okay.
That might be a good idea, said about like, there's a number of homes that had septic systems installed in the 60s. And the tanks that were used then are now the pumping chambers, pumping back to fields more than 100 feet away. You see any problems with these old pumping tanks?
I don't usually. A lot of times their integrity is still pretty good unless somebody has like repeatedly driven over or if it's gotten cracked somehow. But it's not uncommon if a drain field fails. A lot of times that tank still might be in good condition and we could still use that tank. Okay, do you have 2 more questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
One is you are continually looking and evaluating septic systems at point of sale.
Yes.
In Milton Township, in the village of Elk Rapids, and now Torch Lake Township.
Yes, and Elk Rapids Township.
And Elk Rapids Township.
Yes.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. So reflect on that for us. And
Okay. Well, you are also like a couple slides ahead of me, so. No, I will get there. Okay, a couple other questions it looks like.
I have a question about the opposite of what you've been talking about, and that's underused. What happens when a system is underused? And I guess we're a good example. High dry septic system, sandy soil, a couple of people, they're, not that, we live here full time, but gone traveling a lot, and I'm wondering, what are the issues with underusing?
The only system that I see problems with underusage is if you have an advanced treatment system. So with those advanced treatment systems, the whole point of that is changing it from anaerobic to aerobic treatment. and then growing or having a media for that bacteria to grow on. Well, if you're not using that system, you don't have any food for the bacteria. So then it can take a while to kind of rebuild up that colony once you're back in the home. But if you have a conventional septic tank drain field or septic tank pump chamber and drain field without an advanced treatment system, I don't see any issues.
Can you pump too often and dilute out the bacteria?
You can. Over there.
What is too often?
I can't put a number on that. So if you have to pump out like every month because it's backing up, that means you have a problem with your septic system and you should be applying for a replacement septic permit. So I don't have a good answer. A lot of the pumpers around here, when they pump out your tank, they can tell you what that sludge level is at the bottom, and some of them will tell you if you're pumping it out too much.
The reason I ask is somebody told us when they put our system in, oh, you can wait 5 years before you pump this thing out. There's only 2 of us in a 3-bedroom house. So it was like, okay, and it didn't appear to be that really could go that long. There's a lot of guess about us. But the other thing is that a neighbor pumps annually as insurance for his septic system. So I don't know if that's correct either. If going every year for an average household is too often?
I think every year is a little bit overkill.
Okay.
That's just me, unless you're having problems with your system and are doing it preemptively. Every 3 to
We want to save our field by pumping more often.
You also want to build up that bacteria in your tank. And then on our end, so in Antrim County, there are a lot of people who can't afford to pump their tanks out even at the 5-year mark. So it kind of just becomes checks and balances, as we recommend every 3 to 5 years based on the use of the home. We're kind of in the same boat. My husband, Tom, who's actually here with me, it's just the 2 of us in a 3-bedroom home. We're probably closer at that 5 to 7 year. It just depends on the use.
Well, the question I would bring up though is when she's asking about frequency of pumping, is it my understanding that the older tanks are smaller than the newer ones? Or are they all come as a standard, the absolute size, that's it, no matter what?
There are all different kinds of sizes. So under our district sanitary code, 1,000 gallon is the minimum. Every once in a while, I'll have a historical one that's 800 gallons. Usually 800 gallons is the smallest that I see for residential homes. Now they all have to be 1,000, but you can have anywhere from 1,000 to a 2,000 gallon pump or septic tank. So
I understand that Michigan is the only state in the country that doesn't have a uniform septic,
yeah.
code.
Okay, and if you want to wait on that, I have a slide about that too. You guys are a little bit ahead of me. Okay, so it looks like I can move on. Okay, getting to time of transfer programs. So Antrim County is our only county in our 4-county district that has any time of transfer programs. So in Antrim, we have Milton, Torch Lake, and Elk Rapids townships that have programs, as well as the village of Elk Rapids. So I just have some numbers up here. Milton Township's ordinance went into effect in 2012. Since that inception of the ordinance in 2012, and these numbers are the end of 2023. So 491 inspections have been done in Milton Township. 11 have been done in the village of Elk Rapids. 1, the village isn't very big. 2, it also has a lot of municipal sewer. So not a ton of inspections in the village of Elk Rapids. Torch Lake Township had 4 inspections as of the end of 2023, but that ordinance went into effect in the fall of 2023. And we have been getting a fair amount in so far this season. And then Elk Rapids Township, their ordinance went into effect this year. Any questions on time of transfer programs?
In Milton Township, which has the numbers to tell you something, how many problems did those 491 inspections reveal?
Let me think about how to answer that. So when I go out to the sites to do the inspection, I very rarely see an on-site failure, right? A lot of these homes are listed for sale. A lot of them are lakefront homes. if there's sewage on the ground, they're gonna wanna fix that before listing it. What I can't quantify is a lot of these homes that I go and inspect are vacant, and I don't know how long they have been vacant. So I do a test hole into the drain field to check for signs of failure. Signs of failure could be black saturated soil on top, water, effluent standing in the stone. For a lot of these homes that are vacant and have only been used intermittently over the past lifespan of the home, it can be sometimes hard to tell the lifespan or the longevity of that field simply because they haven't been being used. At least in my mind, the strong point of these time of transfer ordinances is somehow not every buyer does their due diligence. And what these time of transfer programs have captured are if there are any property or site limitations for on-site septic before somebody buys the home. So if you want to buy this small cabin, can you tear it down and rebuild, or are you limited to the on-site septic? So I can't tell you how many number of those have captured. The other thing is with time of transfer programs, a lot of the buyers and even a lot of the sellers don't always know what on-site systems are. So at least at some point, hopefully they're gonna have some documentation that they do have a septic, and there are recommendations for how to maintain it and where it is located.
Can you also look at water?
Yes, and I also take water samples, well water samples, not surface water. Yeah.
Are there benefits to having double septic tanks, you know, and 2 septic tanks in one?
I think it depends on who you ask the question. So there are times I do have 2 tanks in order to reach the total capacity. So our drain field and septic tank sizing goes by the number of bedrooms in the home. The more bedrooms you have, the larger tank, the larger size drain field. Along some of these lakefront parcels, you need a bigger tank, but now all of a sudden that big tank is going to be in quite a bit of your groundwater. So instead of 1 tank, we'll do a couple smaller septic tanks to reach your capacity. It depends.
Do drain fields ever recover by themselves? So if you're left vacant for a year or more, do they work?
Yeah, some can. Yep, so there are some systems. I know there is one on Northwest Torch where it actually has what's called a diverter valve or a bull valve. And then he will switch between this one small field and this other small field on a time schedule. Okay, so then in your PowerPoint, you'll have a copy of that time of transfer report that looks at what I look at for the water and the wastewater systems, as well as how your drain field meets current code and any property limitations or recommendations we have. And then getting to the statewide code question. So there is the big discussion right now about how Michigan is the only state that doesn't have a statewide sanitary code. There was a bill that was proposed, there was traction on that statewide sanitary code. Last I heard is it was going back to the drawing board. So as of right now, the Michigan statewide code for residential is still jurisdiction by jurisdiction.
And
So,
health departments, including ours, were opposed to it.
yes, yep. So some health departments were opposed to it because some of the proposals they had in there simply weren't manageable from a work and staffing level. So I know they had in there like inspections every 5 years. If that happened, we would have had to hire like 20 new staff in our department just to do these inspections. And one thing to keep in mind is that even though Michigan doesn't have a statewide residential code, look at some of the other state codes that are out there. Like we've talked at conferences about how maybe the statewide sanitary code in Missouri is if you have 5 acres, the code is there is no code. It's your property, you can do what you want. So another point to bring up is, while Michigan does not have a statewide residential code, Michigan does have a statewide commercial code. So that commercial code regulates any wastewater, on-site wastewater, between 2,000 and 10,000 gallons. There is a state commercial code that regulates that does have specifications and isolation requirements to groundwater and surface water. So that commercial code came out in 1994. Some of it is pretty dated, but it is online. There is also what's called, that statewide commercial code is called the Michigan Criteria for Subsurface Sewage Disposal, if anyone wants to look it up. There is also a draft criteria of that code. The draft criteria was not passed and into law like that 1994 one was, but the draft criteria is another criteria for commercial systems that you can reference and use. And the difference between the two is the commercial code addresses, if you have a hair salon, each chair produces X amount of gallons a day, and it's a very prescriptive code, right? You just do the math. With the draft criteria is starting to look at wastewater strength. So for example, for food service, I can only do a half a gallon application rate per square foot in sandy soils. That's half that of a residential home, because you need more absorption area to spread out for all of the biologicals and the bacteria to break down that waste product. So that draft criteria is looking at not only the gallons, but also the strength and what type of wastewater. Anyone wants to know? And then on a final note, Michigan just launched what's called the Michigan Save Septic Loan Replacement Program. So a question that I routinely get asked is there any grants or is there any funding to replace these failed systems? Unfortunately, there's not much out there. So Michigan Eagle, Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, partnered with Michigan Saves, it's a bank, where they just launched a program where there's 2 different tiers of loans that you can get to help replace a septic. So I think it's a great program. The link is in the PowerPoint you'll be getting if you want to look it up. The bank worked with Eagle on setting, if you have to replace your system underneath this program, what are the minimum standards that those systems have to meet? And it might give an insight onto what that statewide code might eventually look like. And then that is it. So my contact information is there. And okay, looks like we have some questions.
What's your opinion, 75 years from now, is the potential that our soils will have lost their capability, their micro capability of breaking down within the great time? And is there a case for municipal sewer systems to be established in, let's say, townships?
I don't know if I have a good answer for that. So I'll routinely see systems that were permitted in the 70s that are still functioning. And that was 50 years ago. Right now, sewers cost money. And trying to get a township or entity on board to run sewers, there is definitely a case for sewers or community systems in an area where we have very poor site conditions for on-site systems. But then the other thing is, where is that treatment plant going to be? Where is it going to treat it? I don't have a good answer for you. Yeah.
So what happens, and what should happen to the septic that's pumped out of the tanks?
Okay, so if I'm understanding, you're wondering when they pump your tank out, where does it go?
Well, where does it go and where should it go?
Okay, that's true. It doesn't always go where it should. Okay, so in an ideal world, so septic pumpers are licensed by the state of Michigan underneath their septic program. They have to pay a license, they have to have continuing ed, and then we go out and inspect their trucks once a year to make sure their trucks are in good condition. Depending on your pumper could take it to a septic receiving facility. Usually what happens in that septic receiving facility is they kind of tease out the solids from the liquid, and the liquid goes to a municipal treatment plant, and the solids could go to like a biosolids landfill. Other septic pumpers can land apply that waste. So there are active land application sites in Antrim County and in our 4-county area for land applying septic. It is a very well managed practice. So when a pumper pumps your tank, they have to log on their logbook the date, the number of gallons, and the address it was taken from. And then depending on if they're able to land apply, they could potentially land apply it they have to log how many gallons were applied to their field. And then they plant crops. And those crops uptake the nutrients. And depending on what crop they take, kind of dictates how many gallons they can apply to that field. And then they have to take a soil sample once a year to check the phosphorus level. In our area, phosphorus is a limiting nutrient. So they are only allowed up to a certain phosphorus level before that field cannot be used.
So at some point,
Is that an Eagle permitted or Eagle monitored?
Yeah, so the septic program is administered by Eagle, but our department does the boots on the ground inspections for the land application sites and the trucks.
so at some point in the past, farmers were receiving this and putting it in their field. Is that still happening?
That should not be happening, no. So the sites that I have around here, a lot of the septic haulers will contract with the farmer to plant crops, harvest the crops. Those crops cannot be grown for human consumption.
So if you wanted to know where your septage is going, you would need to talk to the hauler.
I would ask your hauler. It depends on what pumper you use, kind of where, if they have a land application site or where they can take it. Grand Traverse County, anything pumped in Grand Traverse County does have to go to their receiving facility. That's kind of in that receiving facility charter. But in Antrim, it kind of depends on who pumps it.
This is just a general question, but can you really consider a city, system fail-safe and a septic system vulnerable? I almost think that a septic system is more fail-safe than the city system, because if you got a rainstorm that saturates the city system, it's dumping it somewhere, usually in this thing. So, it's just, you automatically don't, by going to a city system, do away with all your problems.
I would agree with you. Yes.
I have a question, do any kind of licensing, collecting, selections with capitals?
No, we do not do anything
That
with.
goes wherever it goes, into the streams and out there.
Yeah. So the question was, do we do anything with CAFOs? So for those of you who might not know, CAFOs are concentrated animal feeding operations. They do pose an environmental risk. We do not have a program, and I don't know if we have any in our area, because it's not something that I'm involved with.
We do.
We do, okay.
We had them in Costa County where I came from, and we found out the city was giving all the sludge to go on the potato fields. And that's been 40 years ago. So that probably has stopped because one of our township supervisors got on it. But that had heavy metals and everything.
Okay, well, any other questions? Yes.
If you ever receive phone calls, like the anonymous neighbor going,
Yes. Phone calls and emails and.
do you have an enforcement capability? Can you show up on someone's site and go, I think there's a problem?
Yes. So we do what's called nuisance complaint inspections. So on our website, we do have a complaint form. Our department investigates complaints for garbage, rubbish, sewage, water issues. You can fill out a complaint form. That form allows us to go out to that site to see if there is an issue. If there is an issue, we will write them a letter and try to get that issue resolved.
Casey, just on the back end of that, the person, and I ask it just because I've dealt with complaints and complaints in my career, does the person that submitted know what you did? Or
That's a good question. So a lot of,
some people expect that you will come back to them and tell them what you did to rectify it. So I just want to
no, it's a good question. So if you don't put on that form to contact, so on that form, we have the location of the complaint and the information of the complaintee, that's the word. If you're making a complaint and you want to be contacted about what we found, just write us a note on that form saying you want us to call you or email you with with results. Yeah, there's another question.
Are ATS systems very prevalent in Elk-Skegemog area?
I can't speak to Elk-Skegemog because I only cover a small part in Antrim County.
Okay, Antrim County.
I would have to look that up. So our department has what's called an operation permit program. So advanced treatment systems are issued a operation permit. Those permits are good for 1 year and they're renewed every year. We contact you for payment and those advanced treatment systems have to be inspected by a contractor, an engineer, or maintenance provider once a year. And effluent samples submitted to me for review to make sure they're meeting the minimum standards. In our 4-county area, we have a little bit over 80 ATS systems enrolled in that program. In the 4 counties, because I get all of those results. The trend that I'm seeing, and I'm sure you guys have seen it too, is most of the good sites are taken. So it's a lot of the wet sites, a lot of the sites that might have clay or some limiting factors that are left. So that number just keeps on growing.
So many of the homes here were built in the 20s and 30s, cottages really, stayed within families. When they built those cottages, they just dug a hole in the ground and everything went in the hole.
It just went away.
Those systems still exist, but there's no way to get them upgraded unless someone sells it.
There's kind of 2 answers to that question. The first is there seems to be a trend of maybe buying that property with a cabin, demoing it, building bigger. So then that would be the trigger that that system is not going to be adequate. You would need a new system that complies with code. The second is if that cabin sells and a septic has not been installed in the past 10 years and it's in a township at the time of transfer ordinance, we would have to evaluate that system. We would know on our inspection that system is not in compliance with our code. So if or when it fails or they are changing use to the homes, that would be the trigger to bring it into compliance.
So there has to be some trigger for you to go out there and look. Otherwise, if it just continues to sort of work, it's okay.
Yep. Unless it's failed to the ground surface or you can see it like an illicit discharge into a stream or to a lake. That's when you could definitely use that nuisance complaint form and call us out there to look at it. Any other questions?
If you've got a failed or a system that's considered unsatisfactory, and if the parties in the transaction decide to close on it anyway, what is your process for dealing with that?
So underneath the time of transfer requirements, I can require an action. I can require that system to be replaced if it is outright failed. Failed to the ground surface, backed up into the home, or failed to surface water. If we know that system might be compromised, what I have had happen is we go out, issue a permit, money is put into escrow, and then a new system is installed.
Well, I think we owe a great thanks for. We do appreciate you sharing your experience, and it was a wonderful event. We could all envision this surface area and things moving around, but we'd like you to have that as a memento of our the night you spent with us without vision. So. We have one other thing. Tonight, those people who wanted to hear about poop, we told them if they are a member and they pre-registered, they RSVP, they would have an opportunity to take some real positive action by having an inspection of their septic, if they have a septic, or having a cleaning. And so they're going to get a gift certificate, if you will, a gift. Imagine this, a gift. There's names in here of everyone, and if you just pick out one of these cards. Mine's the 4th one. Oh my goodness. What is that name?
Linda Travis.
Linda Travis?
I'm not a member.
Wait a minute. We have a problem with our process. Let me speak to this lady right over here about this process. Well, you can be a member. The gift certificates are $100. Would you like to donate us? Oh,
I need to give them back to these people.
really? You're not a member?
The reason I'm not a member is I don't live on Torch.
You don't? Let's clear something up.
I live up here. with
We do not discriminate. No, this is a serious conversation we're going to have. We don't care where people live. We really don't. Not for membership. Our mission is education about all these waters and these issues. And so it's important to have riparians, people that live adjacent to water, but also people that are far away, because we really are all affected by each other's actions. So you don't have to live on a lake, a stream, or you don't have to live in our area to become a member or to be informed and come to our meetings. So you shouldn't feel, I'm going to speak to this lady right over here, though. Let's try this one more time.
Well, okay. This one's a blank one.
All right, congratulations, Jay. All right, Bob, do you want to say a few things?
Well, one thing I would say is that I'm torn between going home to check to see that the screws are on my lid for the tank and calling my daughter to tell her that she can cancel the porta potty that I was going to require when she brings her 25 friends here this summer. But I won't. I want to make sure that as many of you as are able attend our next gathering, which is the annual meeting on June 28th, starts around the same time. Ruth Bay will bring even a more generous supply of food, and we'll have some beer to go with the wine. I hope that Shorts comes through again. I wanted to tell you about a couple things on that agenda. Bob Kingon, who asked more questions than anyone tonight, and is a former president of ESLA, and has had many, many roles with Tip of the Mitt, including finding their new leader, is going to make a presentation on the new website for riparians that began with asking them questions of the new riparians about what they wish they knew when they moved in, and what they could do about it. From everything we're hearing, it's a fabulous new website, and not just for new riparians, but those of us who have been here for years. Just a few other things to mention. Sam, stand up, Sam. Sam is going to tell us about one of the new projects we'll have this year, which is on aquatic gardens, which I'm learning myself about the importance of these what many of us fishermen just call weeds, that are critical to the life of our lakes, and lots of other environmental news as well. The man standing up over here is going to tell us a little bit more about what's going on with our lawsuit. We finally made some headway on that in the last couple months. The judges said no to Burnett on the issue of just throwing the suit out. I real briefly want to point out, Ken Krentz had asked a question here tonight. I think we should all give a little round of applause to Ken, who I know I pissed off periodically through this whole process, but helped get together 8 volunteers, right? Yes or no?
You must be talking about fish.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's my only question. And we clipped, and with the help of an instruction from the DNR, what was it, 38,000, 35?
Yeah, almost 40,000. Bob's bringing up a good point. This spring, the DNR has been planting ground trout in our lake for the last few years now, and they've been wanting to clip the fins for identification, so later when they're caught, we can know where the fish ended up, right? Well, the DNR is pretty shy, and they're getting more and more shy of personnel and money to do these things. They haven't been able to do it. So last year we offered, hey, give us a call, maybe we can help you out. And this spring I get a call, can you help us out? Well, Bob went out with an email, and I made a few phone calls, and it turns out we had more volunteers than we could handle. And that's a good thing. And that's why we bring it up. We had about a dozen, right, Bob?
Yeah.
About 12 or 14 of us went and spent not that long, less than 2 days, really, and it flipped all these fins.
And that was another reason that I brought this up, is the critical nature that volunteers serve for ESLA. And, the fact that you all are here tonight suggests that you are engaged and interested in these issues. And, reach out to us if you have a specific interest. Make sure we've got, I think Deanna made sure we have everybody's email. And yes, and as well as if you want to take that ultimate baby step and tell us you're interested in a position on the board. We're all getting older and grayer all the time, and looking for a little younger blood or more stable older blood. I also wanted to make a pitch beyond that. The short things we're going to have in July with Steve Jessmore, who is just an incredible photographer who has a place on the Torch River, and he was a newspaper photographer in the Booth newspaper chain for most of his life, and has become a freelancer since he's retired. As the pandemic began, his freelance work shrunk, and he said, this bird, he's never done it. Didn't know much about birds. I'm going to get into bird photography. I'm going to really study this. He won the top national award for Audubon. Wow. And many of his pictures come from the Torch River, those areas where you see lots of loons and cranes and other water birds. He's captured birds in flight. Like when you see his pictures, you won't believe it. And I think we're going to have a sellout crowd for that. And then in August, we have Ron Remick, who you may remember when we were first trying to figure out what to do about swimmer's itch, and there was so much concern, coming back to tell us what additional research has told us. And I will tell you this, the answer is not to trap mergansers and send them out here and release them. That is a bad idea, even though some respected journalists recently wrote a story about it and said that it might be the answer. The last thing that I would point out is that at this meeting in late June, we will have a changing of the presidential guard. And I will tell you this, unlike another election this year for president, we expect ours to go very smoothly. Right, George? Right, George? That's it. I know you're all eager to get home or to get to a restaurant for dinner. Thank you for coming.